Retro Future.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, this is Bonsard of Radio Retro Future, and it finally happened. We reached 6,000 subscribers last week, and although in YouTube numbers it doesn't mean much, I feel we need to give it some attention by doing another Q&A. Our work on the next video is still in progress. I'm working on a new lore video, I'm experimenting with a new artist, and we are also working on a video on high and low concept in world building, which might become one of my best videos on the topic yet. And I'm probably going to use the format like I used for a previous video on writing on journals and diaries, as it did far better than I anticipated. I guess you can argue that's the case for the channel overall, or the book series. The Casket Girl Kickstarter is now officially done, and people have reported that they've received their rewards, and I'm really looking forward to their opinions, because we're gonna get a lot of new readers. Nothing astronomical, but steady growth nonetheless. If you want to get a shot at getting collector's edition on our books, you can, as we'll launch NIGHTWATCH in October. That's our Steampunk RPG, and we'll also have our fictional books and audiobooks. Yes, we have audiobooks on Audible and other places. And with that said, let's get on with the Q&A. Drifter Dracul asks, "Still having fun, man?" Yes, I am. It's hard work. Typing until the middle of the night is routine at this point, but if you enjoy what you do, you don't work a day in your life. I won't be quitting my day job anytime soon though. People have the impression that I'm doing this for a living. Not saying it's impossible, but I would need to develop a lot more and probably find a literary agent, but we'll see what happens when NIGHTWATCH goes live on Kickstarter in October. That said, we are looking for playtesters for our Steampunk RPG, and the best way to do that is by getting in contact with us through Discord. Link down in the description. Infamous reviewer. Who or what inspired your writing? As for who inspired my writing, I don't really have any idols. There are authors I hold in high esteem, like Robert E. Howard, Lovecraft, Walter Gibson, and Matsumi Shiro's earlier work. I guess it was my exposure to Warhammer Fantasy, StarCraft, and a comic called ElfQuest that really made me want to create my own stories. I also loved Chronicles of the Black Moon back in the day. I always attempted to get other people involved, but was never that successful until recently. We're really starting to find ways to get the community motivated and work on the collaborations. Visual design, vehicle design, that type of stuff, other types of feedback. When it comes to visual design and world building, I can say Ranj Murata has been a major influence on me. In case you haven't noticed, I'm a big Last Exile fan, and one of the reasons is his visual world building. There are basically created two factions that literally fit together like puzzle pieces. Well, maybe not literally, but if you want to know what I mean, go check out my video on Last Exile. It's probably some of my best work. Runic Revenant asks, what got you into steampunk? In short, my love for history and science fiction. As a kid, I often disassembled and reassembled old devices, so DIY was always there. When I was 18, I joined a reenactment group. It lasted for about 10 years. I gave fencing training, commanded a block of 100 pikemen at one point. I did a lot of crazy show fights. Then I discovered my passion for writing and eventually steampunk. Really got into steampunk when an event called Emporium Finesque happened in the city near me that really opened my eyes up to its potential and started my first blog, Tupperware Steampunk, that would evolve into Radio Retro Future down the line. It was the first time I was my own boss. Literally, I created Dankert Lexicon as my avatar for the blog, interviewing people in character, and he would eventually become this guy, the founder, who appears in Bound for the Sticks. Also, he has his own short story that kind of explored the ideas. Yeah, experiment with short stories, folks. I cannot stress this enough. Remember that but one of the big things, one of the big takeaways that I learned, especially when I got into steampunk, is that taking on responsibilities like going on an adventure. That's probably my biggest lesson. DJ DeVille, what is your favorite steampunk trope and what is your least favorite? My favorite thing about the steampunk concept is how it combines history with science fiction. That's my favorite thing about it. My least favorite would be that nearly all settings now are like goths in brown, or just fantasy with a steampunk skin. Overall, a lack of references to the time period, and I would love to see a steampunk referencing the West Africa Squadron, for example. You would think that would fit the zeitgeist, but no, of course not. Infamous reviewer, how did you begin your journey into steampunk as a genre? I started writing fantasy short stories and sci-fi fantasy novel called Euphoria. They weren't great. I hope to create this sci-fi epic universe inspired by the Dutch Golden Age and the Crusading era, but never finished it. But I learned some valuable lessons. My actual dive into the steampunk genre came forth out of this working on the Steampunk Beginner's Guide. After several years of Radio Retro Future, I wrote the first short story of the Association of Ishtar, the Call Girl, S36. It's the first short story I wrote, and that's now people's favorite villain of the series so far. We even based a short comic on that. That will probably be a stretch goal during the next Kickstarter. The Association of Ishtar is, of course, an ongoing story. Things are developing faster than I thought they would go. So I'm very curious what will happen, especially with some big events going to happen soon. Speaking of big events, for my Dutch viewers, I'll be attending Erasmus Con on the 14th of August from the top of my head, and I'll be on 2 different panels. It's a 4-day event. From 10 till like 5 p.m. So not in the evenings, which is good for me because I'll be driving home. So I don't mind, but I just hope that I get my expenses, and of course I hope I'm gonna have a lot of fun. So yeah. A Runic Revenant. What inspired C34? Okay, he means this thing. The Fascinators, I tend to call them. They were introduced in a short story called Swarms of Fascinators. I'm not entirely sure what inspired it, but it's funny what people read into it. I was thinking of costume ideas back then. That's also what inspired S36. And you know, everyone on the events was already wearing top hats, so kind of like having a monstrous top hat that's controlling its wearer seemed like a good idea. So, you know, if you're a steampunk who does costuming, make a C33 cosplay. Yeah, they're also gonna be in the role-playing game, of course. Many people assume it was based on a character from Meet the Robinsons. I thought for some reason, because I haven't seen either show, I thought it was a thing from Lost in Space from 1965. That family is also called the Robinsons. I did not learn about the 2007 series until I was preparing this video, because I could not find the walking hat when looking for Lost in Space. Drifter Dracul asks, how goes the steampunk community? Is it starting to pick back up, or is it still frozen from around the pandemic era? So, I mean, it kind of means, what do you mean with the steampunk community? I mean, when it comes to comics and products, yeah, there's a lot of steampunk themed games, board games in particular, and RPGs. People are still making steampunk themed things for Dungeons and Dragons. There's still steampunk comics being made. So on that side, not much has changed. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, it's still a niche. It's not as popular as mainstream fantasy or science fiction. But yeah, if you're talking about the costume community, yeah, that's mixed. I mean, in the United States, there are definitely some bigger conventions like TeslaCon and the Chicago World Fair that seem to be doing very well. Like I myself, I don't really have time to visit events, but the last ones I visited here over in Germany and the Netherlands, I was not impressed. So it's not as popular as it used to be, but when I say not as popular, I mean in relation to how popular it used to be. Like when you went to fantasy convention, you used to see steampunk everywhere, and you still do, just not in the same measure. But there's still a lot of people walking the steampunk get-ups. But yeah, the problem, what I addressed in previous videos, it just lacks direction. And people who are in the costume community just do not share my interest in the same regard as people who love anime and that type of media do. But who knows, maybe when the game is done, I'll take it to Steampunk events, see if people want to play or support it. Infamous reviewer, discuss what other authors at present time, other than yourself, are doing something productive with the genre of steampunk that is original and worth following. I do not follow that many people. I do not have a big finger on the pulse, and the simple reason is I just don't have the time. I mean, it would be great if I had somebody who would kind of take up the journalism part of this. That would be an idea for the future. So if you feel called to do some reporting on gaming media and all that stuff, let me know. Of course, Johan Alexander, or illustrator, is working on his own comic, Jaka Mechanic. He's an Indonesian artist who does most of our illustrations. He has, and the Jaka Mechanic takes place during the Dutch-Indian period, like 1900 or so, and he is working on a English translation. That's gonna happen. Holly Rosing of the Boston Metaphysical Society is, of course, still putting out stuff. Jonathan Fesmeyer is still working on his Weird West. I forgot what the series is called. Katja Foglio and Girl Genius series is still going strong as far as I can tell. I got into the Skies of Fire series. I think that's already done. I've got the whole series digitally, but I have not had the time to read it. I'm also looking forward, of course, to Frostpunk 2, which is scheduled to release. There was another steampunk-themed game, but it didn't really appeal to me. It was very current year-ish, if you know what I mean. Yeah, but in the board game space, I came across another one last time. Anyway, that's just the state. I mean, people need to unify behind a certain definition of steampunk. We just have to, in order to move it forward and, do more things than just more fantasy settings with mechanical components. That is something that we really need to work on, and that way we can actually move the steampunk genre forward also, both in gaming and in other things. That was the entire motivation for making the Association of Historia Multiverse in the first place. Never Moose, what do you think of the idea of realistic alternate reality fiction with respect to fantasy and science fiction classifications? It's a lot of buzzwords, but I think I can answer it. Let's start with realistic alt history, which most likely falls under sci-fi, as these are speculative fiction, what if stories, what if this character wasn't assassinated, and so on. And that said, you also have historical fiction, which is usually romance or young adults. I'd say that's more of its own category and stuff I'm not into, romance and young adults. Then you have like alternate history with like vampires and werewolves and aliens. Yeah, that's fantasy. Then you have high concept fantasy, alt history. Now I'll make a video very shortly that talks about like what I mean with high concept exactly and how that relates to world building. But when I think about high concept fantastical alt history, I think of like Vampire the Masquerade or Interview with a Vampire. There you kind of also meet the boundary of, is this speculative fiction or fantasy? And I'm inching to a speculative fiction at this point. But also is a discussion about, target audiences and the universal fantasy that I discussed in previous videos. But done right, you could include fantasy tropes in science fiction. As a matter of fact, that's what I'm planning for the third novel to do. But it means understanding what you're doing. But man, fantasy tropes, much work, because you're so straddling the line between what is science fiction and what is just outright magic. And that's kind of my issue at the moment. It's something that I'm bouncing up against, where, I think that most readers would find it acceptable, but, if you want to explain this as a concept, it just becomes very muddied. You need to create very specific, a clear, well-defined framework for when you do that. Now, and of course, there is like the very cheap, very lazy alt history shit, which is like, well, we have World War I, but it has magic and werewolves. And it's like, okay, So we have werewolves and magic, and yet the whole of history just led up to World War I, our World War I. Just like that. I mean, this is like one of those typical examples where the magic is not there to explore interesting subjects, but it's just spectacle, right? With no influence on the world building whatsoever. Runic Revenant, who's your favorite character you've written so far? Hard to say. My characters are kind of like blank slates as I start the story before they turn into strange beings that they end up being. Some are fun to write, but only sporadically, like Founder, who, because all the encounters with him tend to be very intense. My favorite duo is Enwin and Igraine, especially because Enwin is such a potential for crazy things. We're looking into turning the Enwin concept into an RPG thing for the players to enjoy. Igraine herself just kinda happened when I wrote her short story S11, She Can't Go Home Again. I have big plans for those ladies, especially for the ladies of our latest novelette, The Casket Girls. And of course I also have a soft spot for Alborough. I have him planned for the next novel, where he'll meet Enwin for the first time, so that's gonna be fun. Infamous reviewer, who are the authors putting out garbage? To be honest, one of the reasons I don't do many reviews is that YouTube is oversaturated as it is, and B, overall they tend to put me in a bad headspace, especially by what motivates writers these days. I want to talk about stuff that inspires me, like Arcane, which I want to write a full review about. It's just that I don't have much time to sit down and consume media. And as it turns out, books and RPGs don't write themselves. If there's something that annoys me, it's the fantasy in steampunk skin type stuff. I definitely would like to see more cyberpunk in the past. DJ DeVille, what is hard science fiction? And is there hard steampunk? I had to Google what this means. When I think of hard science fiction, I think at highly conceptual sci-fi or something that's very hard on scientific accuracy. And according to Wikipedia, it's the latter, stating scientifically accurate and logic. For All Mankind and The Martian would be hard sci-fi. The opposite of this would be Dune, according to some, because it's more science fiction fantasy, so that would be soft sci-fi. That said, my first instinct was to suggest that Deranged in the Machine would be an example of hard steampunk, because of how I constructed the themes into the story, that being cyberpunk in the past, which I referenced before. But also, I dove more into the fantastical. Fantasies based on reality, sure, but there's also the rift, so there's that element to it. But on the other hand, there is a strong internal logic to that. So does that make it hard or soft sci-fi? Because it's hard wired into the speculation about what the setting is. And that brings us to a larger question. Again, what is a genre? I made a video on this a year back or so. Is there a existing collection of books and stories that could be defined as either soft or hard steampunk? And what separates them? Now, I made a video separating Gaslamp fantasy and steampunk, that being plainly fantasy versus science fiction. But are there other factors that could be distinguished here? So please let me know your thoughts in the comments. What would be examples of hard or soft steampunk? And please use examples of books and other media. Give me examples of books that would fall in either category and why. Are the masks that the association members wear for any purpose other than hiding their identities? Yes, in fact the beaks are there to hide the more complex components integrated into the helmets. That's where the whole idea of the beaks came from. Runic Revenant, what characters are based on yourself? The founder from Bound for the Sticks, sort of. The founder is based on the character I use for the Steampunk Beginner's Guide, Denker Lexicon. He's also the starting point for the City of Arcology. If you've not watched that video yet, we have a guide to the City of Arcology. Man, was that a hard thing to write. And then there is Fitzgerald H. Bendelsmith, whom I voice for the Association of Ishtar videos, but he has yet to be canonized. I'm considering reimagining him as a native to Atlas instead of Arcology. Let me know your thoughts on that. Then there is Associate 200 and Then there's Associate 212, also based on the photo shoot I did. He even has his own miniature, well, 2 in fact. Yes, I've done a lot of modeling over the years. Infamous Reviewer, what's the main fuel source used on Earth and Elysium? In the most parts of the industrialized worlds, it's just fossil fuels like coal and oil. Although in the 2070s they are working on wireless energy towers. But that's a story for another time. However, you can find its short story Violet Skies on REAM. It's a subscription service I use as a Patreon, and you become a follower for free or become a member and get all kinds of extras. Also, REAM is looking to roll out Kickstarter integration by the end of the year. I don't know if that's going to be in time for Nightwatch though. On with the questions. So, on Elysium, they mostly used biofuel made from local fungus that grow inside the Elysium structure. However, some energy systems do draw from the structure's generators themselves. Drifter Dracol, are you going to have soft skills for smart players or the Puppet Master to have a good penmanship and drawing skills as a seemingly frivolous option, but otherwise is really important? This is a question about Nightwatch. Yes, in fact, our skill system is all about that, but instead of giving bonuses, investing points in skills unlocks perks. And these perks either give you special actions, allows you to use certain weapons, or allows you to perform. This includes artistic skills like singing and illustrating, and also administrative skills. Again, you can join our playtest by joining us on Discord, link in the description. Infamous Reviewer, is the 7th Chairman a dictator at heart? What's her main drive and motivations? Oh, the 7th Chairman. Like Igraine, the 7th Chairman started off as a bit of a joke, an experiment just to see what happened, but she quickly grew into many readers' favorite character. I have various ideas for her, but in many ways she is like the founder. I feel she's best used as small measures, although her machinations might be important in the grand scheme of things. I'll have to see if she'll get her own arc. I just don't have that many hours in the week to write. That said, if people are curious to the story of the 7th Chairman, again, it's on REAM for free for followers. And also, she has her own comic, which you can read for free on Global Comics. I'll add it down in the description below. If it isn't already there, I think it is. Buy my stuff. Anyway, Drifter Dracol asks, off the top of my head, you explained that while everyone can visit these other worlds, they can bring stuff back with them, and they can stay there for longer than a couple of days, or else things break down. So to take back stuff that's worth them, they would have to need some artistic ability to draw sketches and write. Both quickly, succinctly, and with clarity, and a good penmanship in order to bring anything of valuable back with them. Yes, I think I also explained this in my Association of Ishtar Q&A that I posted a few weeks back. For those not familiar with the series, go watch our lore videos on the Association of Ishtar series. But what he's referring to is the Traveler's Decay. Whenever somebody or something leaves their own plane in this multiverse, it will degrade and eventually be destroyed. So, if you want futuristic technology, you have to reverse engineer it and produce it yourself. Taking photos and drawing is indeed one way of doing it. We actually had a discussion in our Discord community if photos would be preserved, and concluded that they would because of chemistry. That said, and we have included items for this in Nightwatch, what will often happen is that sliders go to another world and just plunder local libraries and similar institutions. These books and documents or whatever are then returned to Atlas and are then photocopied as soon as possible. But that's just one way of doing things, and I'm really looking forward if people who play the role-playing game will come up with their own methods that we can then canonize, if original enough. So, yeah. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to conclude this Q&A. I hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something. If you've got your own questions, be it about writing, the Association of Ishtar, me, the channel, whatever, let me know, and maybe I can do another Q&A, maybe once every 2 months or something. I'm sure there's going to be another Q&A in preparation for the RPG. However, I'm gonna be very busy because there's a lot of conventions coming up, so I don't know how often I can post videos, so we'll see. That said, I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, make things your way.